Now, I'm assuming that everyone on this chat, or everyone can hear and see me. There's a little question mark bubble up in the top right-hand corner. If someone can just confirm that they can hear and see my ugly mug. Give it a couple of minutes just to let a few people kind of come through and join in. Cool, awesome. That's always a good start. Thanks, Tracy. Give it 2 or 3 more minutes, and then we'll crack on to it. Cool. It looks like everyone can see and hear it. Let's go. I guess we'll crack into it then. So, hey, Morgan's team. So, look, thank you guys for taking the time to catch up with the AMP team today to talk through money matters and why it matters. So, look, my name's Liam. I'm one of our key account managers here at AMP, and we have one of our South Island workplace advisors, Cassandra, on the line. And you may not be able to see her now, but you should be able to see her in about 10 seconds. So I'll pass you over to Cassandra just to do a quick introduction.
Good morning, everyone. So yeah, my name is Cassandra from AMP. I'm based down here in Christchurch, and essentially my role with AMP is to look after our corporate clients, members in regards to advice on KiwiSaver and superannuation, and yeah, a bit of advice along the way in regards to retirement and all of that sort of thing as well.
Fantastic. So look, before we kick into today's presentation, I will go through a quick disclaimer. So look, the presentation that we are going through today is what we call class advice. So it is what we call general advice. So we aren't taking into account any of your personal financial situations. So make sure that you do contact your own personal financial advisor, as I'll be able to kind of step through with you in terms of what that means for you on a personal level. So as I say, do make sure that you do contact your own personal financial advisor post this presentation. Cool. So the money matters checklist. So look, so there's about 5 kind of key topics that we want to kind of go through today. So number 1, why save and putting a savings plan in place. Investing 101, guide to your super, tools to help you get there, and then we'll wrap up at the end. So look, so this presentation should take roughly about 30 to 35 minutes, and there'll be an opportunity for about 10 to 15 minutes at the end to answer any questions. So what you'll see, and I know that a few people have already found it pretty well already, but right at the top right-hand corner, you'll see a little question mark bubble. So feel free to populate your questions as we go through the presentation. And as I say, right at the end, we'll kind of go through all of those, and hopefully we can answer anything for you today. So I will pass it over to you, Cassandra.
Wonderful, thanks, Liam. So saving essentially helps us get the things that we want in life. So, you know, that might be once our borders open up, going for an overseas holiday to Hawaii, saving for a kid's education, or it might be something big like saving for your first home, or something small like saving for a new iPhone. So saving is one of the most basic and most repeated bits of financial advice out there. Despite the importance of saving money, many of us aren't following through on that tip. And when it comes to doing the right thing financially, knowing you should save just isn't isn't quite enough there, and that makes sense. It's tough to do something consistently without understanding why you should save money and put in all that effort in the first place. So, after all, saving money does take discipline and, a certain amount of sacrifice as well. So, if you make, say, 60,000 per year, try and spend like you're making 40,000 per year, so spending less than what you earn there. Next slide, Liam. So with saving money, it is incredibly important. I think most of us do know that, it can give us peace of mind, expand your options for decisions that have a major effect on your quality of life, and, eventually it gives you options to retire there. So most people who are wealthy got there through a combination of their own hard work and smart savings and investment decisions. So, you can become one of those people as well. Next slide. One of the best things about being an adult is the independence and freedom to do what you want when you want, obviously within the confines of law here. But the less you save and the more debt you accrue, the less independence you will have. So, to be financially independent and unshackled, you need to beef up your savings. Next slide. So when we look at making a savings plan, we first need to have a goal in mind on why we're actually saving. So, for example, I've got a goal this year to renovate my bathroom, and I've decided I want to have this all done by the end of the year. So I need to first off know the total cost of what this is going to actually be. So I need to go around and get quotes for how much the work is going to cost. So once I know that total cost of what I'm looking at, I then now need to revisit my weekly spending and see what I have available to save towards this goal, and then work out when I'll have enough money to actually start the renovation. So I personally find it really helpful to set up a separate savings account and each week put through an automatic payment from my salary into this account for this goal of mine. Often otherwise, if you simply decide, once you've been paid and you've paid your bills to then put money into an account, things come up, you might be wanting to do some shopping or going out for tea. So if you set up things like those automatic payments, it's almost taken out of your hands each week. So you're not having to think about it there as well. Next slide. So who here has found that essentially when one thing goes wrong or breaks, you can guarantee something else will? Murphy's Law, or the saying, it comes in threes. So this is where an emergency fund comes into play. So there's lots of theories out there of how much you need. Some say 3 months worth of wages, others say 3 months worth of expenditure. But put away what you can and add to it when you can, because you will need it at some point. With everything that's happened over the last few years with COVID, we've all known someone who might have been affected with changes in their income or job security. So putting away something, even if it's small, it is a start. And, we often get asked in our role if it's better to be paying off debt first before starting an emergency fund. You could, and, particularly high interest credit card debt is useful to pay off first. But when something happens, and it will, without that emergency fund, you end up potentially running up that debt all over again. So that's where it really, will help you in the long run there. And I'll just pass you through to Liam for advice on investing there.
Fantastic. Cheers. Thanks for that, Sarge. So, investing. So, look, in this next section, what we'll go through is, what investing is, and what the key differences are between what Sandra was going through with saving and what the differences with investing, and understanding things like your investor profile and asset classes that make up investments. So firstly, we, as I said before, we firstly need to kind of define what the key differences between saving and investing. So saving is essentially the leftover money from your earnings after you've paid all your bills, after you've gone out to dinner and you've paid all your other obligations. That's the money that is there left over from that. When we look at investing, so by definition, investing is allocating resource with the expectation of generating income and generating profit. So this could be anything from buying something like a business, or buying, say, collectible stamps, or this could be anything from all the way to your KiwiSaver. So, when you are investing into something, you have that intention of making a return, or or the expectation that it appreciates in value. But the key thing to remember with investing is that it's how these assets kind of grow over time and how they grow and how you nurture those assets. So, you know, when we're looking at investments, we are looking at two key things. We're looking at risk and we're looking at return. So, you know, when we are looking at the amount of return that we're looking at making, there's a large element, there can be, you know, a higher element of risk. So just making sure that we understand things like our investor profile, which we'll go through in a bit, to understand that return that we're chasing for the risk that we're prepared to make for the return. I'll flip over to you, Sandra.
Awesome, thanks, Liam. So now that we've covered off, you know, some of that sort of terminology with investing, let's take a look at some of the investments, some of the different kinds of investments, which can be called asset classes as well. So, you know, what are some of the investments you might have heard of before there? Generally, there are four main kinds where you've got cash. So this was your short-term deposits there. So what you see in the bank there, bonds, property, and shares. There are also others, for example, like gold, classic cars, or art, but those four are the ones that can produce a steady income in the form of interest, rental income, or dividends from profits as well. So, you know, these are made to spin a return for us, which is generally what we're after when we're investing. Many times things like gold, art, or cars are not strictly investments, as we're speculating on whether someone in the future will pay us more than what we've bought it for. So it's like taking a bet that the value will go up when it may not. So it's more speculation than investing. Next slide. So with the four main kinds of investments here, with cash, so this includes a bank savings account where the returns are low compared to other investments, but generally low risk. So we can take out part of all of our money whenever we want. There are also bank term deposits. This is where we give the bank a lump sum for a set period of time, so a fixed term, and in return we get a higher interest rate than what we would with a savings account. But obviously at the moment, those interest rates are pretty low in the bank there. With bonds, these are like an IOU issued by the government or a company. So we give them money for a certain period and they promise to pay a certain interest rate and repay us on a certain date. And this is called the maturity. So bonds lock away money for a set period of time, but they can also be traded, so bought and sold through a share broker as well. With property, this will include residential investment property or commercial property, and the income comes from the rent on these properties, as well as by selling it for more than what we paid for it in the first place, and that's called the capital gain there. So with shares, so this is the higher risk side of investing here. This is where we invest in a part of a business through the share market. So we literally are buying a share in a company and we make money from shares by either receiving dividends, where the company distributes part of its profit to its shareholders, or by selling them for more than what we pay for them, so getting that capital gain. Next slide. So what type of investor are we? And, you know, every few years, this can change depending on your situation. You know, particularly if you're in KiwiSaver or if you had a superannuation scheme, you know, you are an investor there as well. So to be successful in investing, it really does help to understand what type of investor you are. So it's sometimes called your investor profile, and it describes terms, things like conservative or balanced. So it's got nothing to do with your own personalities here. An aggressive investor is not an aggressive person. And hopefully you would have seen this before on your KiwiSaver, where you might be in, for example, a balanced fund there. So it describes the mix of investments that you might find appropriate and the results you might expect to achieve as well. So our investor type is based on three things. So how ready we are to invest, how much time we have until we need our money, and then our attitude towards risk. Next slide. So are we actually ready to invest? So how prepared we are to invest depends on our job security, income, and whether we do have that emergency fund. But it also depends on how much debt we're carrying. So is it better to pay off debt or invest? One rule of thumb is if you're carrying debt, it's generally better to pay it off first before investing. So for example, if you have a credit card debt at 20%, paying it back is like getting a 20% sure return for our money with no risk involved. So it'd be hard to get the same result through investing, especially with the risks that would come with it. The same goes for mortgages or debt. The one exception is particularly with KiwiSaver, where if you're not in KiwiSaver, then you're missing out on those contributions from your employer and also the government as well. So it's better to be in KiwiSaver and pay off debt at the same time there. Next slide. So how soon do you need your money back? So how much time we have before we need our money also influences what type of investor we are. So we would invest in different kinds of assets if we're investing for the short term, which is 1 to 3 years, mid-term 4 to 9, and long-term over 10 years. You might be investing for a car, a child's education, or retirement. So some investments like KiwiSaver are not easily accessed without certain conditions. So they're not liquid, so you can't get your money out easily. So not every investment is appropriate for the short term there. And next slide. And how much risk are we actually comfortable with? It's pretty difficult to gauge how much risk we should take on because, this can change, and often we're okay with risk when things are going well and cautious when they're not. So, particularly with KiwiSaver, with that coming out in 2007, when the financial crisis hit in 2008, a lot of people's KiwiSaver balances were quite low, so they didn't necessarily, they weren't impacted by the market drop. If we come around to recent times with COVID, people's balances were, it's considerably higher, and that big drop in COVID, a lot of people did panic because potentially they weren't in the right fund for their comfort levels as well. So, it is always good to check in to see actually where you are comfortable. And in investing, it's a bit like if you've ever played snakes and ladders as a kid. So in investing, risk and return are like the snakes and ladders. So when you're chasing those higher returns or trying to get a better result there, it's like we're looking for ladders. And the bigger the ladders, though, the bigger the snakes that come with them. And if anyone ever promises you long ladders and no snakes, they're not playing investing, they're actually playing scam. So it always does go together there. So how do we actually figure out what type of investor we are and then choose the right sort of investments for us? You can go, there's lots of online tools available there. Sorted is a really good website to go through some of their questionnaires to work out where you sit in there as well. And I'll just pass you through to Liam, who will go through a bit more on your super.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks for that, Cassandra. So this next section that we'll be going through is your Super 101. So we'll go through some of the key details that we need to understand when it comes to something like KiwiSaver, and some of the impacts of decisions that we make today versus the impact of decisions that we make tomorrow. I guess the basic rules or the overnight understanding of KiwiSaver is that you must be a New Zealand resident to join KiwiSaver. You must be 18. You need to be at least 18 to 65 to join KiwiSaver. If you are under 18, which I'm assuming there might not be too many people here on this call under 18, but under 18s can join KiwiSaver on the approval of parents as well. So we do actually have quite a large amount of parents starting to sign up their children to KiwiSaver early on in life. So by the time they actually do hit 18, they've actually got quite a substantial amount of money in the KiwiSaver. So those are the basic rules of who can apply for KiwiSaver. One of the other key things to note is, as Cassandra was talking about around the risk profile is about return. So one of the quick and easy ways to get return from KiwiSaver is taking advantage of your government tax credit. So for every dollar that you put into KiwiSaver, government will match you up to 50 cents. Up to $1,043. So you put in $1,043 and the government will give you $521 every year. So that's an instant return on your money as soon as you invest that money into KiwiSaver. So just making sure that for those of you that do have your KiwiSaver, you are doing that absolute minimum to make sure that you are giving that government return back of $521 every year. So taking into account all the things we've talked about and trying to wrap this up into a bit of a scenario, I'd like to introduce you to Jordan. So Jordan has just started at Hawkins and he's joined the customer services team. He's just left high school and it's his first job and he's never been in KiwiSaver before. Now, Jordan's had a chat with an advisor and the advisors kind of talked through with Jordan around 3 key decisions when it comes to KiwiSaver or when it comes to investments in general. So number 1 is what would happen if Jordan would change his KiwiSaver contributions? Number 2, what would happen if Jordan changed his fund selection? And number 3, what would happen if Jordan changed his contribution and his fund selection? So to go through scenario A, I will flick it back over to Cassandra.
Awesome, thanks Liam. So on scenario A, what happens if Jordan changes his contribution percentage here? So next slide. So on scenario A, at the moment, Jordan, he's contributing 3% to his KiwiSaver. So, you know, at the 10-year mark, he's got about 42,000 in his KiwiSaver. And if we look at that 30-year mark, he has about 248,000 in his KiwiSaver. So next slide. So on this,
just to preface that 1 year as well, Sandra. So that's based on the fact that Jordan's earning $50,000 a year, and that's also meaning that Jordan's on $50,000 for 30 years. So I'm assuming that he should probably get a pay rise over some point in that 30-year career, but that's on the basis to say that he's on $50,000 a year, and it's constant over that 30-year period. Sorry, Sandra.
No, all good there. So on this slide here, this is if Jordan actually changes his contribution to 6% from the get-go. So you can see here, you know, the differences at that 30-year mark, you know, he is looking at another 120,000 more at 30 years if he does go into that 6% contribution as well. And next slide. So this is where we can see a really, really big difference within his balance there, where he's actually decided to change to a 10% contribution. So, you know, at that time, at 30 years, he's actually got 533,000 sitting in his KiwiSaver scheme there. So if we just go to the next slide, you know, he has about 300K more at 30 years. So it's a really, really big difference. And you can see, you know, the longer he's in that scheme for, you know, by making those changes in the beginning, how much it snowballs, you know, later on in life for him as well. And Liam will just have a chat in regards to if he actually changes his fund selection.
Thanks, Cassandra. I kind of like to go through a little bit of a personal example when it comes to changing contributions. You know, as Cassandra was saying kind of at the start of the presentation, just around understanding our savings goals. One of my big savings goals personally, about 7 or 8 years ago, was to buy my first home. I live in Auckland, and it's obviously getting more and more impossible to buy anything here at the moment. And that's never been more true now in 2022. But I knew that my savings goal was to buy my first home, and I knew that a number of years ago. One of the big things that one of the big changes that I made all those years ago was to change my KiwiSaver contributions. So I was always contributing 3%, the stock standard. It was out of sight, out of mind. But I changed that to 10%, and this was even before I was working in investments in KiwiSaver as well. So, but I knew that was my long-term goal. Towards the end of last year, I just managed to purchase my first home with my KiwiSaver balance that I've been putting away, and that was from the impact that changing my contribution percentage from 3% to 10%. Had over that time period. So that's really one of the key examples, and why I think this is a really important part of this. So is, you know, the impact of changing your contributions and what that can mean for you in your future when it comes to retirement, or when it comes to buying your first home as well. Cool. So we'll go through scenario B with Jordan. So scenario B is what happens if Jordan changes his fund selection. So after talking with an advisor, Jordan has reviewed his finances, but unfortunately he can't actually afford to, you know, take more than 3% out of his $50,000 a year, given that he's got quite a bit of expenses going out, and he's obviously trying to pay off some of that debt that has been accruing as well. So he can only contribute 3% into this KiwiSaver, but Jordan would still like to make a bit of a change. So Jordan decides, well, hey, look, maybe I might change my fund selection. So when it comes to KiwiSaver, you choose, you do have a selection in terms of funds. So as Cassandra was mentioning before, you've got things like conservative funds, which are low risk, low return, and then you've got growth or aggressive funds where there's a higher return, but there's a higher risk affiliated with that. But at the moment, Jordan's only contributing 3%, and he is in a conservative fund, which, as I was saying before, is low risk, very low risk, and very, very low return as well. So over that 10, 20, and 30-year time period, by the time Jordan hits 30 years in KiwiSaver, he's just made over $450,000 by the time he's hit that 30-year time mark. If Jordan was to change to balanced fund, so as I was saying before, that's a mid-risk, mid-return, you would see the difference that fund selection would make to Jordan's balance. So, that would be an extra $100,000 over that same time period by the time that Jordan hits that 30-year time mark. And lastly, if Jordan was to go into a growth fund, once again, the difference between being in a growth fund and being in a conservative fund can be the difference between $150,000 to $170,000. Jordan choosing a more aggressive fund to invest in, Jordan's been able to increase his KiwiSaver balance without actually needing to increase any of his contributions either. So as I was saying before, there's no actual money coming out, more money coming out of his account. This is just based on a fund selection decision that Jordan's made. So I'll get Cassandra just to go through scenario C.
Wonderful. So with scenario C, this is Jordan's met with an advisor and he's decided he's actually going to change both his fund selection and his contribution as well. So he's really going for that, potentially that long-term retirement goal here. So next slide, Liam. So with this scenario C, this is him being in a conservative fund contributing 3%, which we've seen before. If we have a look at the next slide here, this is the changes going from a conservative fund into a growth fund and also contributing 10% in total there. So, we can see here he has 30 years, over 400,000 more in his KiwiSaver balance there as well. But even at the 10-year mark, he has essentially doubled what he had in his KiwiSaver as well. So if he was going for a first home at that point in time as well, you can see some of those changes early on, how much of a difference it does make, even for that first home side of things as well. And so next slide just reconfirms the 400K more difference at that 30-year mark as well. And now Liam will just go through some more of the tools available to you.
Fantastic. So yeah, so tools to kind of help you achieve your goals, tools to kind of help you get to where you want to be. There are some fantastic tools available to you, and some of these things obviously don't cost you too. So one of those things that one of those sites I would urge you guys to kind of go out and check out is definitely Sorted. There are some fantastic tools when it comes to Sorted, not only when it comes to retirement calculators, it's also mortgage calculators, debt calculators, which I've used myself quite a lot as well. So remember to kind of check out some of those tools, and some of those tools can actually show you how far away from that gap that you actually are. So so make sure that you do check out some of the stuff on Sorted. That wants to work for me, which it will. Cool. So the next tool that you can use is the A&P Mountain Calculator. So I will flick out through just some links so that you can access some of these tools here as well. So the A&P Mountain Calculator is great, especially for those of you, as I say, who are working through retirement goals, when you're coming close to retirement, or you're coming close to first home. You can actually start to really map out what that looks like for you, and it actually shows you what your deficit is, or how far away you are from that goal, or how far you are to that goal at the moment. So definitely check out the A&P Mountain Calculator, especially for those of you that are trying to kind of find out where you are at the moment when it comes to both retirement and first home. For those of you that are A&P members, there is also Better Money that helps you manage your money as well. So that's a bit of a budgeting tool that links up all your savings accounts and bank accounts, which I personally use myself. I do find sometimes it's a little bit scary once I do go up to a few too many, I do eat a bit too many takeaways throughout the week. My Better Money doesn't look that great sometimes, but make sure that if you are an A&P member, to check out Better Money, and it is a really great tool for those of you who kind of want to see real life in terms of your deficit when it comes to your actual accounts. Cassandra, just to cover off this one here before we wrap up.
Awesome, thanks, Liam. So essentially, you know, the value of getting advice is immense. For those who actually receive it, they end up with about 52% more in their KiwiSaver. And often one of the biggest reasons that people don't get advice is because they think they don't have enough assets or wealth to need it. But, you know, I truly believe that everyone in KiwiSaver should at some point in their life reach out for advice. As, you know, as you've seen by some of those slides we've shown earlier, the difference it can make in your in the long run of how much you'll have in retirement, you know, it is massive. So for all of you, those of you that are on the webinar today, I'm certainly available to speak to you on a one-on-one basis, either through Teams or have a chat over the phone. You know, and we can sit there and either review what you're currently doing with your KiwiSaver and offer a bit of advice on what your investor profile is, or anything like that. So, you know, if you haven't reviewed it in a number of years or want to understand a bit more about, you know, what funds you're in or your risk profile, you know, we can certainly help you out there. So just please feel free to reach out after this webinar.
Fantastic. So it comes through again. Cool. Look, so thank you guys for taking the time once again just to kind of catch up today. I hope that some of you today kind of made a little bit of a difference and you do walk away with something from this presentation. As I was saying earlier on in the preso, there is a little question mark bubble up the top. So if anyone does have any questions, please feel free to fire them through, and we'll definitely answer those as we go through. And I already see one here. So do these figures, so from Anonymous, do these figures include compounding interest on a balanced fund? What would be the estimated percentage increase over the 30-year time for 3 to 4% contributions compared to putting 10% or 10% into KiwiSaver rather than keeping it 3% and diversifying, not keeping all eggs in one basket? 7% into other investments streams like shares, etc., which are often touted as 10% on average in the market. So look, I can answer part of that question for you. So those graphs are taking into account the money that you put in, the money that your employer puts in, the government tax credit, and also takes into account the compounding interest and the returns that you get over that time period. So that is taken into account that whole mixture. We don't have the numbers when it comes to the 4% 30-year time period. I think that we can actually probably pull that from the mountain calculator, but we don't have that. I don't have that on hand at the moment. Sorry. When it does come to the other part of your question, Cassandra, would you be able to answer the other part of the question, or would that be more of a one-on-one advice conversation?
Yeah, probably more of a one-on-one a catch up that we can certainly go through there. Yeah, as it is quite individual to you there.
Are there any other questions or anything else that we can help you guys out today? Cool. Will you get a copy of the slide? So yes, so we will be supplying a recording post today's webinar. So there will be a recording there that I believe will be uploaded on the internet. There will also be links to as I was saying, for all the topics that we talked about today, some of the tools as well that you can use. So we'll provide you not only that, but also the tools that we've gone through today. So you should have copies of that on your intranet as well. Any last burning questions that we can answer for the team today? Cool. And just a quick note to those on the call. So Auckland's Adventure will get contact details. We'll get our contact details as well, and everything will be on the Hawkins SharePoint too, so you'll be able to access that. There'll also be contact details to Cassandra as well. So for any of those of you that do want to have a one-on-one advice conversation, for anyone that has attended today's webinar, you can have that conversation with Cassandra if you do wish. So there will be links, there will be a recording, and there will also be contacts to Cassandra as well. Cool. Is there anything else that I can help out with? Fantastic. Cool. Easy crowd today. So as I said before, thank you guys. Thank you so much for taking the time to catch up with us today. Look, you know, everything, all the contact details, everything up will be up on here for SharePoint. Feel free to fire through any questions to myself at Cassandra post this webinar. And look, we look forward to catching up again soon. Cheers.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.